The architecture of invisible power. Modern democracies operate under an illusion of choice. Elections, parties, and policies project the appearance of autonomy, yet beneath them lies a financial architecture that dictates outcomes before ballots are ever cast. The Federal Reserve System, born in 1913, privatized the creation of money and transformed governance into administration. The state no longer issues its own credit, it rents it from private banking institutions. Political office thus became the management arm of financial power, a form of monetary feudalism disguised as democracy. Footnote: The Federal Reserve Act transferred monetary sovereignty from the U.S. Treasury to a consortium of private regional banks, marking the first permanent fusion of public authority and private finance in American history. Fiat money and the birth of perpetual debt. Every modern dollar begins life as a debt. When the Treasury issues bonds, the Federal Reserve buys them by creating credit from nothing. Those dollars enter circulation, but the interest owed on them does not exist. To pay the old debt, new debt must always be born. This structure ensures the total debt of the nation must rise exponentially to sustain liquidity. Money thus functions not as wealth, but as a perpetual claim upon future labor. Footnote: Debt-based currency systems create mathematically unsustainable obligations since principal is issued without matching interest, enforcing continuous borrowing to avoid collapse. The proof of weapons network. War is not an aberration of this system, it is its equilibrium. Every cycle of credit expansion culminates in military expenditure, which justifies further debt issuance. The proof of weapons paradigm means economic power is validated not by productivity or morality, but by the ability to manufacture and deploy force. The Federal Reserve funds the military-industrial complex. The complex guarantees demand for the Fed's product, money. Footnote: Defense budgets serve as both fiscal stimulus and debt absorption mechanisms, perpetuating a closed loop between central banking, defense contractors, and congressional appropriations. The fusion of state and corporation. After 1971, when the dollar severed from gold, money creation became unrestrained. Financial institutions evolved from intermediaries into sovereign actors. Investment banks, asset managers, and central banks merged into a single self-referential ecosystem. Entities like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street emerged as de facto ministries of capital, owning controlling stakes in nearly every major corporation, including defense, media, and pharmaceuticals. The result? A privatized Politburo of capital, invisible yet omnipresent. Footnote: Post-Bretton Woods deregulation enabled institutional investors to concentrate ownership across sectors, effectively converting shareholder capitalism into oligopolistic governance. The illusion of democracy. Citizens believe they live under representative government, but policy originates not from legislatures, from lobbies, think tanks, and corporate donors who script legislation before it reaches the floor. Politicians, left or right, are marketing divisions of the same financial sponsors. Elections become theater designed to renew public consent. As long as the populace argues over parties, the credit system remains untouched. Footnote: Campaign financing and lobbying structures in the United States allow concentrated financial entities to shape both political platforms and regulatory frameworks, rendering bipartisan politics functionally unitary. Debt is the engine of empire. From the British East India Company to the Federal Reserve, empires have always been financed, not conquered, into existence. Debt allows control without occupation. Nations are captured through the IMF and World Bank using loans conditioned on austerity, privatization, and access to resources. In this way, debt replaces colonialism. Military force is the enforcement arm of default. Footnote: Conditional lending mechanisms institutionalized under Bretton Woods transformed global finance into an instrument of geopolitical leverage, often termed neocolonialism through credit. The privatization of the state. Corporations no longer lobby governments, they are the government. Asset managers install board members across industries, control pension funds, and influence legislation through economic blackmail, capital flight or credit withdrawal. The so-called deep state functions less as a conspiracy than as a network of contractual obligations. Bureaucrats manage compliance, executives dictate policy, citizens fund both through taxation and inflation. Footnote: concentrated cross-ownership grants asset managers effective veto power over political decision-making, blending private fiduciary duty with public authority. The multipolar counterforce. For the first time since World War II, Western hegemony faces structural resistance. China, Russia, and the BRICS alliance are constructing financial rails outside the dollar, using gold accumulation, bilateral trade, and energy-backed settlements. Africa and the Middle East, long colonized through debt, now negotiate sovereignty through the Belt and Road Initiative. Whether authoritarian or democratic, these nations share one aim: emancipation from dollar dependency. Footnote: the de-dollarization trend reflects the re-emergence of commodity-based trade systems and regional monetary blocks as counterweights to U.S. reserve currency dominance. Bitcoin as the peaceful weapon. Amid this confrontation, Bitcoin represents a new instrument of resistance, a monetary system without a central issuer, immune to confiscation, inflation, or censorship. To the speaker, it is the proof-of-work counterforce to the proof-of-weapons empire. Yet its power exists only in self-custody. Once absorbed into ETFs, treasuries, and corporate vaults, it becomes another node of control. The revolution depends not on ownership but on independence. Footnote: Bitcoin's decentralized architecture challenges the state corporate monopoly on money issuance but is vulnerable to centralization through institutional custody and regulatory capture. The spiritual dimension of sovereignty. Beyond economics lies a moral test. Every civilization reflects the ethics of its money. A debt-based currency breeds exploitation, a sound currency demands accountability. To reclaim freedom, one must reject hatred, division, and passive consent to systemic violence. True sovereignty begins within, when individuals refuse to serve false gods of profit and power, and instead serve truth, cooperation, and conscience. Footnote: the lecture concludes that financial reform without ethical reform reproduces tyranny under new symbols. Moral sovereignty precedes monetary sovereignty.